Nice coat. Thanks.
The late 90s, early 2000s was a tough year for Batman, at least when it came to making a live-action movie, as after 1997's Batman and Robin failed, everything past that was just scrapped, and for a while people weren't willing to make another Batman movie. Sure, there was plenty of shows like The New Batman Adventures, which was basically just a continuation of Batman the Animated Series, but that was slowly about to, end again. And we did have Batman Beyond and the Justice League show, Justice League Unlimited, and even Teen Titans, and a new Batman series called The Batman was out there, but it was all animated. And for a while, it didn't really look like we were going to get that next big screen live action adaptation of The Caped Crusader. That is until 2003, when one man swooped in. That was director Christopher Nolan. Now, this was early on in Christopher Nolan's career. He was more known for his low-budget movies and being able to turn those into something worth watching. I mean, they were very well received, the movies that he did do before this. And he wanted to do a more serious and realistic take on the Batman character, as we had gotten from, say, Tim Burton, even though you'll find the difference from Tim Burton and Christopher Nolan's. Tim Burton's is far from realistic, sure darker than the usual adaptations we had seen before, but not realistic at all. And after Tim Burton and Michael Keaton left the project, Warner Brothers wanted to get Batman back to that campiness of the 60s show with Adam West. In the end, what failed Batman? And Warner Brothers was on Christopher Nolan's side with this. They wanted to see if they can get away with being able to make another serious Batman story, but also still being able to appeal to a younger audience. So things went on for a couple of years, and on June 15th of 2005, we got Batman Begins, which is exactly what it says. Christopher Nolan starts from the beginning. Bruce Wayne is stuck in prison until he gets recruited by Ra's al Ghul to join the League of Shadows, where he gets his training, and that's where it all begins for Bruce Wayne and Batman. Now, this movie was interesting as Christian Bale was cast as the Caped Crusader, as Bruce Wayne. It was interesting because he was the youngest actor to portray the character at that time. When he took the role, he wasn't even in his 30s yet, and by the time the first movie came out, he was 31 years old. Nobody has been younger than that since, being able to don the cape and cowl. The second youngest is Robert Pattinson, but he was around 33, 34 when he started filming his Batman movie. The role was also offered to Jake Gyllenhaal, Henry Cavill, and Heath Ledger and Cillian Murphy, who we will both see later in this trilogy of movies. And Michael Caine was Alfred, which I think everybody loved that choice. However, he wasn't the first choice, as the role was actually offered to Anthony Hopkins, who turned it down, and that's when they brought Sir Michael Caine in to do his thing. Then we have Liam Neeson as Henry Ducard. However, it's very, very deceiving, and you'll understand why when we get to what happens in this movie overall. Then we have Gary Oldman as Commissioner Gordon. However, he was first offered the role of Ra's al Ghul because he was known to play more of the bad characters. But I think this time around he wanted to see what he can do when it came to being more of a protagonist in the story, and I think the Commissioner Gordon role fit him very well. However, he wasn't Commissioner in this yet, he was just Detective, I believe. He wasn't up to Lieutenant yet. We'll get there eventually. Then we have Katie Holmes, who plays Rachel Dawes, a Christopher Nolan created character who is a childhood friend of Bruce, who's supposed to be the main love interest throughout this story. And then, of course, Cillian Murphy, here he is again. He was offered the role of Batman, didn't get it, so he gets the role of Dr. Jonathan Crane, or as he's known by his alias, Scarecrow. This movie was interesting because it had multiple villains, as then we get Tom Wilkinson as Carmine Falcone. However, Falcone's not used as much as you would think in this movie. I think he was really underutilized. The main villain we're really focused on here for a while, or to be thought as the main villain, was Scarecrow himself. But then we get that little twist toward the end of the movie where we find out that, shocker, Liam Neeson was Ra's al Ghul this whole time. And it's right there from the beginning. I mean, when so-called Ra's al Ghul dies in the fight with Bruce Wayne, I mean, you kind of figured that that wasn't the real Ra's al Ghul. It was almost like the Phantom Menace with Star Wars, where there's Queen Amidala, but wait a minute, that's not actually Queen Amidala, that's a decoy. This person is the actual Queen Amidala. Like, the twist wasn't all that surprising when you think about it, and we come to realize that this whole time Descartes, or Ra's al Ghul, is the main villain as he's trying to create this bomb that will blow up all the entirety of Gotham City because, well, it's just a bad, corrupt city that, you know, nobody can really fix at this point. You know, he's got a point, but of course Batman's going to try to find a way to stop him, and in this one, Batman gets the help of Lucius Fox, who's played by Morgan Freeman. Lucius basically helps build the stuff for Bruce Wayne to be Batman, from the Batarangs to the suit to the Batmobile, even though in this one the Batmobile is a gigantic tank, which, I mean, if you're going for more realism and you don't want to make it a car, I guess a tank would be okay. Like, it's not my favorite Batmobile, but at the same point in time, I understand.
Does it come in black?
And throughout this whole time, Batman is just trying to figure out his identity, figure out who he truly wants to be, because we all know Batman, he has that no-killing policy. He might beat the shit out of you, but he's not going to kill you. And by the end of the movie, he realizes the only way that he's going to stop Ra's al Ghul is if Ra's al Ghul dies. But Batman doesn't kill him, he just says,
I won't kill you. But I don't have to save you.
leaving Descartes and the train to crash into the bridge and blow up, with Gotham being okay, but of course Ra's al Ghul is not. And for this being the first movie of a trilogy and origin story, I think its main problem is it starts off really slow. Like, he doesn't become Batman until about an hour into this 2.5 hour movie. But again, when it's an origin story, you're kind of expecting it to start slow, and what I liked about Batman Begins was, with it being that way, it always left room for the sequel to have major improvement. But nonetheless, this movie, on a $150 million budget, made back $3.73 million at the box office, which was more than Batman and Robin, and hey, this clarifies as being a box office hit, so they let Christopher Nolan go ahead with his second movie, and we started seeing superhero movies be taken more seriously around this time, and people started to realize that, yeah, even though some comic book characters you can't do the realistic thing with a character like Batman, it's okay to do more realistic and even dark takes on a character like this, because with Bruce Wayne, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. He doesn't need to be this funny comedic relief, and Christopher Nolan showed that with Batman Begins, which leads us to 3 years later. On July 14th of 2008, The Dark Knight hit theaters, and to this day, it's seen as probably the best Batman movie ever. It's my favorite Batman movie, my favorite comic book movie of all time, period. There's multiple reasons for this. Now, in this one, Batman starts to kind of contemplate retirement as he starts to think to himself, is this really what Gotham needs, is something like this? He starts to pledge for Harvey Dent to become the next mayor of Gotham, and he starts to trust him more because he put 1,000 crime lords in jail all at once, so obviously he can clean up the streets of Gotham very quick. We get a Christian Bale returning as Batman, and of course the other cast from the first movie also returned, but a new cast of people came into the fray as Aaron Eckhart played Harvey Dent / Two-Face, and Rachel Dawes was still in this movie, but instead of Katie Holmes playing the character, it was Maggie Gyllenhaal. And then of course there's the big one, the one that I think got the most criticized when it was announced who was playing this character, only to become one of the best comic book movie portrayals of all time, that being the late great Heath Ledger as the Joker, with this posthumous performance that he had in this movie. And to me, that's just basically the best part of the movie. It sucks to say, I always hate when I watch a Batman movie and Batman gets outdone by the villains in the movie, but there's just no denying that without Heath Ledger's portrayal of the Joker here, this movie might not be as big as it is today. I mean, yeah, it's kind of great script and all that, but when it comes to Christian Bale as Batman, for me, he's always just kind of been up and down, and you start to see a trend with his Batman that gets real annoying real quick. Now, in Batman Begins, when he finally says, "I'm Batman," this is what he sounds like.
I'm Batman.
He's not the first to do the raspy voice. Michael Keaton did it, Val Kilmer did it. George Clooney, not so much, he didn't do the raspy voice, but when it came to Michael Keaton, he was the first one to really be like, you know, if Bruce Wayne is trying to be, you know, incognito about being Batman, then shouldn't he disguise his voice so that way it's not so easy to detect? And Christian Bale decided to stick down that road, and I think in Batman Begins, it was the right amount of raspy to be intimidating and to be undetected by who he actually is. But now we get to this movie, and he starts to do this.
I'm not wearing hockey pads. Where are they?
Like, I get it, he's shouting, it may sound a little worse than usual, but, like, the difference is there. Like, you can tell he's just doing too much, and it really starts to become a problem that brings his Batman down in many ways. It's almost like you can't take him seriously, you just can't help but laugh. But I can tell you this much, his interrogation scene with the Joker, his fight with the Joker, it was really good. I don't think it really takes anything away from all that stuff that happened there. Now, I think another problem I had with this movie was the way Two-Face was created in here. Not necessarily how they changed it from him getting acid thrown on his face by one of Maroni's, you know, right-hand men in court. I think the main problem here is that after he becomes Two-Face, it's more about a vengeance thing, and I don't think it was ever that way when he was Two-Face. From what I remember, even in the animated series, it seemed like Harvey Dent was like this, like, bipolar schizophrenic, like he had two personalities, but Harvey Dent was always able to control the other one until the accident, when his other personality would kind of, you know, come out and take control. But in this one, he just kind of goes insane and plots revenge on the people who wronged him, and he even tries to kill Commissioner Gordon's son, which, you know, that gets a little iffy in itself. You would have thought, oh, okay, maybe he's going to try to kill his wife, but it's his son that he tries to go after, and after a tussle with Batman, he falls to his death, and then he just doesn't exist anymore. Like, I get this is supposed to set up the story for the third movie, but it just didn't make sense to me that he wasn't even Harvey Dent for a day. He was like Harvey Dent for like a couple hours. And then he just kind of went out in the most, I think, it just didn't feel right for him to be killed off. There could have been some other way they could have gone about this, but when it came to the way Bruce Wayne was vying for Harvey Dent to become mayor because he's the hero the city needed, it made for the cover-up that was to come, as after, you know, Batman had his fight with the Joker, which really all the Joker was doing was just kind of being intimidating. He loved chaos. He was going to create chaos no matter what it took, even if it was like, you know, holding two boats of people hostage, one with criminals, one with everyday citizens, telling them, hey, one of you can push the button and kill the other one, or I can just kill both of you, you know, at the same time if you don't make a decision at midnight, or he can blow up a hospital and walk away from it and then not have it work and then beat on the remote until it works again. Seriously, that's one of my favorite, like, movie bloopers that was actually left into a movie. It was, like, genius. But by the end of the movie, Batman realizes that he's not the hero that Gotham needs at this moment, and he tells now Lieutenant Gordon, tell them that I killed Harvey Dent, that it was the Batman that did it. So now basically Batman's a fugitive and nobody wants Batman anymore. He killed the so-called new hero of Gotham City.
Why is he running, Dad?
Because we have to chase him.
And this movie was highly, highly praised by the critics. It got a 94% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's actually, I think, the second highest comic book movie rating in the history of any comic book movie that's out there. With a $185 million budget, this was the first Batman movie to gross over $1 million at the box office. It was a hit. Now, I think it was more because people saw the first one, realized this could work, and then also there was the anticipation of getting to see the Joker in live action again. As keep in mind, we hadn't seen the Joker in a Batman movie since Jack Nicholson's portrayal in Tim Burton's 1989 movie. Now, my problems with this more have to do with what happens in the Batman movies now when the Joker is present. And that is, everybody tries to copy this version of the Joker. Like, I feel like, although Heath Ledger did a terrific job, he also created this trend of just everybody trying to do his Joker and trying to put their own little twist on things, but not having it work. Minus Jared Leto's Joker. We've kind of seen this recently. Like, one of my complaints about the new Joker in the Batman universe, you know, don't get me wrong, I like it. I think he's creepy looking. I think, you know, it can be something they go down the road, but it's trying too hard to be Heath Ledger's Joker in a way with the voice and the mannerisms that I just feel that the Joker doesn't feel like original anymore. Unless you're watching the Joker movie, it just doesn't feel like anything anymore other than, oh, remember Heath Ledger's Joker? Let's try to do that again. And I think another thing is, it started to give everybody high expectations for sequels in other movies, especially ones that start slow and build up by the sequel. Like, it's just like, this is the perfect sequel ever, probably one of the best ever made. Then when people see it, they go, oh, all sequels should be like this, when most of the time they're really not. Even if they're good, most sequels don't live up to the expectation of what the first movie had to offer. And again, I think my main problem with this is that the hero was outdone by the others, not just the villains, but I feel like Lieutenant Gordon in this movie, you know, Gary Oldman was doing a lot better than Christian Bale. There was just a lot more characters in here that stole the show than Christian Bale as Batman. It was still a Batman movie, don't get me wrong, because this next movie is not going to feel like a Batman movie at all. But Christian Bale just had an act for getting outdone by his co-stars, and that was a problem. However, the impact made people realize that sometimes not giving the main villain an origin story can make it real mysterious, because this Joker, nobody ever really explains why he is like he is. He's just kind of there, and they don't give any name to him. He's just the Joker. It just makes it all the more creepy that there's this guy that we don't know who he is, why he's like this, and why he's doing this. We just know that it's what he likes to do, and he's going to do whatever he can to get what he wants. It makes it so ominous, and that mystery of what it could potentially be, as I have heard some theories that this Joker was like a war veteran who has PTSD and he went insane, and now this is his way of like getting back at the world and all that kind of stuff. There's that thing, and that could definitely be a possibility when you're talking Christopher Nolan in this case, when he tried to make something like this more realistic. And another thing is that it's politically charged. A lot of superhero movies didn't like to go the political route. Unless you're Batman Returns, then you kind of, get a little political in that aspect. But a lot of superhero movies, it was just, you got the hero, you got the villain wants revenge on somebody for doing something. Other than that, it's never politically charged. But this one, all three of the Christopher Nolan Batman movies had something political about them. But this one, this is when it really starts to show, and it just, people were okay with it. Then there's the thing of the good guy doesn't always succeed, because in the end, you gotta kind of say, the Joker won, didn't he? Because he wanted everybody to think that he was, helping Gotham, and although that didn't happen, he also wanted to show people that Batman's the villain. And when Batman took the blame for Harvey Dent's death, you kind of think to yourself, Joker wasn't right, but he technically wins there because you made him right in some sort of way, and now the good guy has become the enemy. And to me, that's the bad guy of the movie winning and the good guy not so much succeeding. I mean, this recent Batman here, it was the same thing. Even though, Batman was able to swoop in and save Gotham, there still was left flooded and in shambles and under martial law because he couldn't get one of Riddler's riddles right. Like, he didn't do a very good job, and although kind of succeeded, still lost in some sort of way, and that's how Christopher Nolan had this movie finish. It wasn't necessarily the bad guy won, but the good guy helped prove the bad guy right by basically making him right in this sort of sense. But now that we got the sequel out of the way, of course, the trilogy had to be finished, and 4 years later, it only took 4 years because, well, Christopher Nolan had a different plan for the third movie, because when you look at all the main Batman villains in the Christopher Nolan universe, the only ones that don't die are Scarecrow and the Joker. The Joker was taken to Arkham, and they were supposed to set up a live-action, what would have been Arkham Asylum type movie. We were supposed to get an introduction to Harley Quinn and other villains we didn't see yet in the Christopher Nolan universe, with a return of a couple of them as well that we've already seen, but because of the untimely and tragic death of Heath Ledger, they couldn't do that, so they had to scrap the idea, come up with something else, and finally 4 years later, on July 20th of 2012, The Dark Knight Rises was released. Now, this one, I remember being super excited for this, because, I mean, I had seen all of them in theaters, all these movies, but this one was just the one I wanted to see where they were going to take this, what they were going to do, like, how were they going to finish it all off, what was going to go on here. I mean, the first two movies were so great, you're almost expecting something flawless from the third adaptation of this movie, right? Well, it's complicated, because throughout this whole 2 hour and 44-minute runtime, yeah, you guys, I mean, this movie was almost 3 hours, but I can tell you, it had a lot more interesting parts and a lot more interesting Batman parts that kept me connected. But in a 2 hour and 44-minute movie, Batman is maybe Batman for like 15 minutes. Like, it doesn't even feel like a Batman movie, and that's a problem. It just feels like Batman characters, but Batman is barely present in here, and there's a reason for that, is this movie takes place 8 years after the events of what happened in The Dark Knight, and nobody's seen Batman. Bruce Wayne, he's kind of older, weakening, and he just kind of, stays indoors. Nobody really sees him out anymore, so, he's kind of, I guess, semi-retired in this case, so of course you're not going to see Batman right away. We get introduced to some characters, like, right away at the beginning. Anne Hathaway plays Selina Kyle in Catwoman, who I must say was one that I highly underestimated when I look back at the portrayals of Catwoman, because obviously most people's favorite is Michelle Pfeiffer's from Batman Returns, and even recently Zoe Kravitz's Catwoman has been getting a lot of praise, but with Anne Hathaway, her Catwoman is different, but it doesn't change a whole lot. Like, Selina Kyle's still this, criminal mastermind who goes out and she deals drugs, she gets things for bad people to make a living of her own, to gain money and credit. That's what Anne Hathaway's Catwoman does. And she even does a thing at the beginning where she, like, plays stupid up until she runs into Bruce Wayne, who figures out that it's like, oh, well, you're stealing my mother's pearls, and then she's like, oh, you caught me.
Sorry. I'm so terribly sorry, Mr. Wayne. It is Mr. Wayne, isn't it? Although you don't have the long nails or the facial scars, sir.
Is that what they say about me?
It's just that no one ever sees you.
That's a beautiful necklace. Reminds me of one that belonged to my mother. It can't be the same one, because her pearls are in the safe. The manufacturer clearly explained is uncrackable.
Oops.
And she doesn't do the whole seduction thing either. Like, I think what we saw with Michelle Pfeiffer and even Halle Berry's Catwoman was they brought the, how do I put it, the sex appeal to the character, whereas this one, Anne Hathaway, has, some sex appeal to it, but for the most part, you're not supposed to pay attention to that. You're just supposed to pay attention to the more, I guess, villain-type part of her, where she's doing the bad things, and you see how badass she is, but also you feel bad for her because you realize that she regrets getting involved with the wrong people, and now she's trying to flee Gotham and go elsewhere because she just wants to live a normal life without having to do what she has to do. So I think her character develops nicely. The only thing I will say is the relationship between her and Bruce seem a little off. In Tim Burton's Batman Returns, yeah, it was good. It was fine. And even in this new Batman movie that recently came out, their relationship isn't quite there yet, but you can kind of start to see it coming to fruition. With this, it just kind of felt forced. Like, I think at first Christopher Nolan wanted to make Catwoman a villain, but then he realized it's just not something you can't do. And sure, she always ends up with Bruce Wayne at some point, but in this movie, it was jumping from, oh, well, I don't want to talk to Bruce Wayne because he's just trying to get information about me, to, wait a minute, maybe he actually cares about me, and by the end of the movie, you're supposed to be like, oh, okay, well, they have moved on, and all this kind of stuff, until you realize that's not what happened here, but we'll get into that later. We have the new villain, Tom Hardy, as Bane.
Damn, boy, he's thick!
I mean, again, was Batman and Robin's Bane any good? No, not at all. But with this one, there still is flaws. I mean, you thought Batman being incoherent in The Dark Knight was bad. Well, in this movie, it's worse. And you throw in the way Bane talks in this movie, and you just got two characters that are on screen quite a bit with each other that you can barely understand when they are. It's just so, like, I don't know, again, with this Bane, it's not really intimidating. At least when he, like, walks around and he doesn't talk, he looks intimidating, but then he starts talking and you're just like, this is fucking ridiculous.
Oh, you think darkness is your ally? You merely adopted the dark. I was born in it.
Hey! Shut up!
Even the Harley Quinn animated series makes fun of the voice.
Oh, the Dallas Cowboys!
Incorrect. The Steelers have won the most games at Gotham Stadium.
I'm gonna blow up Gotham Stadium.
However, we'll find out later that Bane, who was made out to be the main villain, wasn't actually the main villain. We do have Joseph Gordon-Levitt in this movie, who plays Detective John Blake. He kind of, I guess, while Gordon is in the hospital after an attack, takes over, but then Gordon hires him as a detective afterwards so they can work together to try to stop Bane while Batman is, well, MIA at this point. And we have Marion Cotillard, who enters the fray as Miranda Tate, who basically is supposed to be seen as the new love interest for Bruce Wayne now that Rachel Dawes is gone. She kind of comes in knowing that Bruce Wayne has gone bankrupt, because we find out that Selena Kyle was actually getting Bruce Wayne's thumbprints so that Ronald Daggett can make Bruce Wayne go bankrupt, basically go broke, and take over the company himself, because Bruce Wayne just doesn't want to run Wayne Enterprises. He just has no interest in doing it, and we're led to believe that now that Miranda's in charge, that Ronald Daggett won't be able to take charge of Wayne Enterprises. But things kind of turn by the end of the movie as you realize throughout all the chaos that Bane's creating, and he even broke Batman's back to, follow that comic and threw him into the pit of hell, as they call it. And while all that's going on, there's the iconic stadium scene where it's Heinz Field, or formerly named Heinz Field. It's now called Acrisure Stadium, home of the Pittsburgh Steelers, where you see cameos from many Steelers like Hines Ward, Mike Pouncey, Ben Roethlisberger, Mike Wallace, Steelers at the time, I should say. You get that scene where Bane blows the field up, Hines Ward is running down the field not knowing that the field's blowing up, and he turns around, he's like, oh shit, the team we're playing, all their players are dead. Like, it's just, that part is always gets me, because it's funny, it's not supposed to be, but it is funny in the somewhat unintentional way.
Gotham! Take control!
You should have respected my authority.
And then there's the thing where Bane goes and frees everybody from Arkham Asylum because he reads the note about Jim Gordon saying, I've been lying to you guys this whole time. Harvey Dent didn't kill Batman. He actually tried to kill my son in a fit of rage and would have succeeded if it wasn't for Batman coming in and stopping him, and Harvey Dent ended up falling to his death. And why Bane went and said, you know, they were put in here wrongly, let's set all of them free. So he kind of, you know, starts martial law with all the prisoners and all that. And we even see Cillian Murphy return as Scarecrow, as he's kind of the judge for people on trial. As I take the term judge very loosely because, well, you know, basically they just punish you by exile or by death. When if you get punished by exile, then you're basically taken out on the icy rivers, and you have to walk those rivers until you fall through and freeze to death. So either way, you're going to die. And through all this time, Batman's trying to fix his back issue, get back up and out of the hole, which he does. And throughout this whole time, too, he finds out the story of another person that escaped the hole. And here, he's thinking it's Bane. You know, he was trained by the League of Shadows, this, that, and the other. But we find out that it was none other than Miranda Tate herself. How do we know this? Well, because, like the first movie, Miranda Tate isn't actually Miranda Tate. She is Talia al Ghul.
What the fuck is this bullshit?
The main antagonist of this movie, not Bane. Why is Bane here? Well, apparently while she was trying to escape the hole, Bane was the one who protected her by fighting off the people trying to grab her, and she was able to get out. And basically, she sees Bane as kind of like a big brother figure and all this kind of stuff, and he was working for her the whole time. It was all part of this devious plan to, wouldn't you guess it, try to blow up Gotham City with a nuclear bomb. Just like her father before her, she wanted to complete her father's mission, and of course it didn't succeed. Batman, with his Batjet, took it out into the ocean away from that 6-mile radius of Gotham City, and presumably faked his death. Because at this time, Bruce Wayne realized, I can't keep doing this. You know, I'm gonna save Gotham City this one last time to get things in order, but other than that, I just can't keep doing this. So not only is Batman dead, or presumed dead, but so is Bruce Wayne. And throughout this time, we're just trying to figure out, is he actually dead though? Like, is he faking his death, or did they actually kill Batman off to just officially end it all? Well, before he died, he wrote down the coordinates to the Batcave for John Blake, the now ex-detective, as he quits his job after seeing what cowards the cops were when he was trying to save the kids, the orphans of Gotham City from the nuclear blast. When they ended up blowing up the bridge so nobody could pass, he realized, maybe this job isn't for me if I'm going to work for cowards. And we then find out that Blake's real name is Robin.
I can't believe you've done this.
Yeah, the Robin cop-out. Like, it had to be thrown in there, because you gotta think to yourself, if this Batman's gone through his whole career without a Robin, somebody had to be. And you know, you had 3 names you could have went with. You could have just said Dick Grayson, Tim Drake, or Jason Todd. You could have said one of those 3 names, and I think we just would have been okay with it. But you had to say that his name was Robin. Like, that just felt very, like, I don't know, I hated it. I hated it so much. And then we come to find out that, yes, Bruce Wayne / Batman faked his death. He is now away from Gotham City. He has settled down with Catwoman, who doesn't have a criminal record anymore, and he is finally just starting to lay low, as we see Alfred back in, I believe it's somewhere in Britain where he used to live, having dinner at the place he imagines, seeing Bruce just sitting there across the table from him with, you know, his lady, his now a significant other, and they just, you know, bring off one last nod to each other, and that's how the movie ends. That's how Christopher Nolan decides to end it. Now, was this movie bad per se? No, I still feel like it's a good movie for other things, but being a Batman movie, it's not so good. He's only Batman like 3 scenes. It includes when he decides to come back, when he goes to fight Bane and Bane ends up cracking his back, and of course the final battle when everything takes place in broad daylight, might I add. This is still the only Batman movie to feature a fight where he's out in broad daylight actually, you know, doing something, because usually he goes out at night instead of in the middle of the day, but this had to be done. Plus, you gotta realize Bane did say in the movie that darkness, he excels in the darkness because he was born there, so Batman was probably like, well, maybe that means he struggles in the light, and he'd be correct in this sense. But I think it's a good movie with the way the other characters handle things. The fact that we see more of Commissioner Gordon's, more heroic side, more brave side, and you see Detective Blake kind of take a stance against everything, and the other cops and politicians going together to try to stop Bane. It's a pretty interesting thing. But with Batman, the whole movie, it's just like, oh, I'm so old and worn out, I can't be Bane, I'm gonna retire, this and that, and I'm just like, the story could have been done so much better, but yet here we are with an unsatisfying ending to an unsatisfying Batman movie. Now, the movie did well. It had an 87% on Rotten Tomatoes, which was better than the first movie, but I beg to differ. And as I've said, the main problems, the fan service cop-out with the whole Robin thing, long and overdrawn. Again, I don't have a problem with long movies if they do something throughout its runtime, but a lot of this movie, there's just things in here that don't feel necessary. Like, you could have cut a lot of it out, and I think we would have been okay. But Christopher Nolan, for some reason, wanted to make each movie longer than the last, and it was just like, alright, no, this is way too much. He does the same bad plot twist again, and of course, as I mentioned, the voices, Batman's, Bane's, they're just terrible, I don't understand, and now they've just become more of a meme than anything else. However, the impact, this is really only the superhero trilogy where we see an actual ending to the story, because people say, well, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy, but there was supposed to be a fourth movie and a fifth movie, and he recently returned as the character of Spider-Man, so his trilogy never ended. And with other trilogies in the superhero genre, we don't see an end, because now with the MCU, even though there's Marvel characters that got their own trilogy, it's still not the end. There's still going to be more, and they're still going to appear in other movies continuing with their story. But with this, it was just like 3 movies done. This is it. Beginning to end, nothing else. And I think Christopher Nolan actually, I think it was the right thing for him to do that rather than have spin-offs and stuff like that. And that's nothing against his Batman. It's going to be a trilogy of movies, but it's going to have other things in between, like spin-offs and all that, to build upon the universe. But Christopher Nolan wanted to make this more realistic and more politically charged type version of the Batman, and you can only go so far with that. And with a lot of the other villains, he didn't want to use any villains with any superpowers. He didn't want to bring like a Mr. Freeze or a Poison Ivy into things. He wanted to bring characters in that you can, potentially see in real life, like a Ra's al Ghul, a Bane, a Scarecrow, a Catwoman, Joker, all this kind of stuff, and I think it worked very well for his universe. Plus, Batman finally gets peace. I feel like in a lot of these stories, even the original ones, the original 4, Batman never truly gets that peace, that ending to his story, where you finally just feel relief for him overall. Granted, it happened in the cartoons for the most part, but when we look at the live-action adaptations, this is the only one where by the end of the movie, Bruce Wayne is happy. He's happy with not being Batman. He's happy that he's now got someone there to love him potentially forever. So, there's that. And this movie grossed, it was like a $250 million budget. It grossed $1.1 billion at the box office. So just slightly a bit more than The Dark Knight, but that's because people wanted to see how the story in itself was going to end. And we were left with a good movie, but I think an unsatisfying ending that really didn't feel like a Batman movie at all. And that was my main problem with it overall. But it's still one of the best trilogies ever made. I mean, I don't know how you can just rack off 3 comic book movies like that in a row, just like boom, boom, boom. Even though the MCU, you look at the ratings to their movies and you're like, oh, they're all great. But when you really, really sit down and watch those trilogies, you'll realize not all those movies are fantastic. But with the Dark Knight trilogy, you can sit down and watch these movies all the way through and not really have a lot of problems with a lot of things. There's going to be problems with some things, but you can overlook that because there's other portions of the movie that just do a good job and that kind of keep your mind off of the bad things, and it's such good storytelling. Christopher Nolan was just able to just take his vision and get inspired by the comics and just create his own world, and it led to one of the best, if not the best, comic book and even movie trilogies of all time. And to this day, people see these 3 strings of Batman movies to be the best ever. None of them really close. Sure, people praise the original Batman or Batman Returns or even this new Batman, but I don't think anything's ever come close to touching what Christopher Nolan was able to do. Even Matt Reeves, who has his own little universe going, I don't think will ever be on the level of where Christopher Nolan was back in 2005 when Batman wasn't being taken seriously enough, and frankly, comic book movies, even though there was movies like X-Men and Spider-Man out, they weren't being taken all that seriously either. They were still being seen as, oh, they're still going to be kid-friendly and campy. We don't really want a super serious, dark story. But Christopher Nolan said, I'm going to show you that you're wrong. We don't need it all the time, but sometimes a dark and non-campy version of this character is what people need and what people want. Of course, he made 3 movies out of it and basically proved all the doubters wrong. Even Martin Scorsese, who still thinks that comic book movies aren't cinema, which is just the biggest disrespect to the people that work on them because, well, you can turn anything into cinema and it's cinema. As long as it's there in film, it's cinema, my friend. All you had to say, Martin, was that you didn't enjoy comic book movies, and we would have all been okay with that. It's fine, it's your opinion, but that's my take overall on the Dark Knight trilogy. You can tell me in the comments below what you think of it overall. Which one of the 3 is your favorite? I know what the majority answer is going to be, but it'd be interesting to see whether Batman Begins or The Dark Knight Rises is your favorite, because I have heard people tell me, you don't like The Dark Knight Rises that much, but it's really not that bad of a movie, and I get it, I understand, but I think with just the expectations that I had and what the other 2 movies set up, it just wasn't how I envisioned it, and it was more disappointing than anything else. But that's it for me. Stay safe out there, wear your mask, get vaccinated, and I will catch you all in the next one.
Criminals in this town used to believe in things. Honor. Respect. Look at you. What do you believe in, huh? What do you believe in?
I believe whatever doesn't kill you simply makes you